and death. You would have already done Unit 1 on relationships with Miss Valentine, so this revision video is all things Unit 2. On the screen you can see that I've put on the scheme of work that we followed when you studied this with your RE teacher. So we started off the module with learning about the origins of the world, then we moved on to the design argument, then we did all things animal rights and stewardship, then we moved on to both the sanctity of life and the quality of life, and then we discussed questions relating to abortion, euthanasia, the soul, the afterlife, and funerals. So during this revision video, we are going to revise each of these 11 topics and what a Muslim, a Christian, and a humanist thinks about each of these. So we will start off with the origin of the world based on religion. Now, when you did this in class, you would have looked at it strictly what Christians think about the origin of the world and what do Muslims think about the origin of the world. And then you would have split up each of those religions into two groups, literal and liberal. So, a literal Christian is one who takes the Bible literally, word for word. It is the whole truth and nothing but that truth. So, literal Christians solely believe that in Genesis chapter 1 verse 3, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Literal Christians think that the world was literally created in 6 days and God rested on the 7th. However, a liberal Christian thinks that although the Genesis story is in the Bible and we should read it and we should understand it, it is not the whole truth. We should interpret it how we wish. So as a literal Christian would think that if it says in the Bible that God created the world in 6 days, that is a full-on day of 24 hours. A liberal Christian would think, actually, you can interpret this idea of a day. Was it 24 hours or was it a longer period of time? And a liberal Christian would also say we can't just rely on the Bible for knowing about how the world got here, but instead we should be looking at scientific sources as well. That source of wisdom from Genesis is one that you will keep coming back to throughout the remainder of this unit and other units also when you look at Christian beliefs and practices. Similarly, a liberal Muslim, would think also you have to use a little bit of science and understanding to go on your own sort of journey of self-reflection on how we got here, whereas a literal Muslim would take the Quran literally, So if the Quran teaches that Allah is the sole creator and sustainer of human life, then a literal Muslim would believe only that. So literal Christians and literal Muslims believe the same, that their Bible and the Quran, their holy books, should be taken literally. But a liberal Christian and a liberal Muslim thinks that, well, actually, we should be going on our own journey of self-reflection. We should be understanding a little bit more about science and how we got here, as well as using our holy books, So there's not just one truth, but they would celebrate science also. So this brings us on to the origin of the world according to scientific discoveries. So when you did this in class, you would have done it as the origin of the world according to number 1, the Big Bang, and the origin of the world according to number 2, evolution. This answers, according to scientists, the big reason of how we got here. You would have only focused on these 2 examples, the Big Bang and evolution. However, you need to bear in mind that some liberal Christians and some liberal Muslims, not literal, liberal, would actually identify with the Big Bang and evolution, but they would have said that God caused it. So on the screen you can see that I've put up the Big Bang and evolution as a split screen, so in 2 different tables, and I'm actually going to explain it to you guys through a 5-mark question. This is because you're getting the content in and also your exam practice, because in a part B, it's 5 marks, you spend 5 minutes on it, a mark per minute. So if we have a look at the Big Bang, the question for the Big Bang is, explain from a non-religious viewpoint of how the universe came to be. So, you need to understand that the Big Bang is a non-religious viewpoint, okay? Even though some religious people might believe in it, saying that God was the reason for it, overall it's a non-religious theory, okay? So you'll get 1 mark for saying many of those who do not identify with a religion or a higher being believe that the universe was formed by the Big Bang. That is your point, okay? You'll say a Big Bang and you'll put it out there that it is the Big Bang. That is what you're focusing on about how the universe came to be. Then you'll have some sort of evidence, okay? That will give you another 2 more marks, okay? According to the Big Bang, the universe began from a single point that kept expanding into particles. The evidence for the Big Bang is redshift, and this led to the formation of stars and planets. You will then go on to explain for an extra 2 marks to get your whole 5 marks the impact that the Big Bang has had on non-religious believers. So just how in a part B 5 marker, if it's asking for a religious point of view, you explain what the impact is for a religious believer or a Christian or a Muslim. In this one, you will explain the impact that this is going to have on a non-religious believer. Okay, the impact could be things that they will now believe that the universe will expand for billions of years, or that this impacts them as they don't believe in God because the world was scientifically created and not through Genesis or the Quran stories. For your evolution 5 marker, okay, the question is explain from a non-religious viewpoint why humans exist. So again, 1 mark for the point. Many of those who do not identify with a religion or a higher being believe that humans exist because of evolution. Then you have some sort of evidence to back up for another 2 more marks, okay? So it's really important in there, if you are mentioning evolution, you do talk about Charles Darwin as he is on the exam specification. So this theory was introduced by Charles Darwin in his 1859 book on the origin of the species. According to Darwin, humans and all living things exhibit various traits, okay, that would show that we were eventually related to apes and we have now evolved, okay? So most animals and most humans on this planet, we were once simple beings, but as life went on, we gathered on and we had complex characteristics, okay? Survival of the fittest, natural selection, use all that specialist terminology from your revision notes. And again, the impact that this will have on a non-religious believer is the fact that God didn't create us, okay? We did not come from Adam and Eve, as the Quran and the Bible tell us, but instead we have come from apes and other complex species, and this will repeat over and over again. The Big Bang and the evolution are 2 fantastic examples when you are counteracting any of the views from the literal Muslims, as both the Big Bang and evolution don't really fit in with a literal Muslim and a literal Christian ideal of how the world got here. So now moving on to topic number 3, which was the design argument. Okay, so we have now looked at 2 reasons to disprove God's existence, which was the Big Bang and evolution. Now the design argument, okay, is going to have an impact for a religious believer because it is a reason as to why God does exist. Okay, it's an argument for the existence of God. Again, so you're getting both your exam practicing and your revision content, I have broke this down to you for another part B 5 mark question. Describe the impact of intelligent design for a religious believer. So you will get 1 mark to say that religious believers would favour the argument for design because it proves that God exists. You'll need some sort of detailed evidence for a further 2 marks. You can use the analogy of the watch that was developed by William Paley, who was the pioneer for the intelligent design argument. So William Paley argued that the existence of a watch would imply the existence of an intelligent watchmaker. Therefore, the universe must have had a creator too. Something so perfect could not have been formed by the Big Bang or evolution. Again, counteracting lesson number 2. Both Paley and religious believers would agree that intelligent design of the universe is God. Okay, so that is your 2 marks for your detailed explanation and the impact this is having on a religious believer. So for topics 1 to 3, we have looked at origins of the world according to religion, origins of the world according to science, and origins of the world according to William Paley and the intelligent design argument. We will now be moving on to looking at different aspects of our living world, okay, such as stewardship, abortion, euthanasia, okay, different topics related to this whole idea of Unit 2, life and death. And then you'll be seeing a lot of the majority of the same things with Christian views, Muslim views, humanist views. In an exam question, whether it be a 2 marker, a 5 marker, an 8 marker, or a 15 marker, you should not be discussing any religion that we have not studied in class, okay? You would have to talk about Christians, Muslims, and humanists. Unless you are a different religion and you are discussing something different in your My Own Opinion section, you can. But you should only be talking about the religions that we've studied for any of the following topics coming up. So, stewardship. Stewardship is the idea of how good are we at look after our world, okay? The care and compassion we are showing to our world. The opposite of this is dominion, okay? The belief that humans can sort of go into the world, use up the resources, use up the animals however we wish, okay? Both concepts of stewardship and dominion are shown in the Bible and the Quran. So let's start with Christians. A Christian says, in the Bible, in Psalm chapter 8, verse 56, you made them rulers of the world, works of your hands. That supports dominion. This idea that after God created the world, we as humans have the authority now to do whatever we want to it. But then there's also a separate view from the original Genesis book of creation that Adam was placed in the Garden of Eden to cultivate and care for it. This shows us that we should also be stewards. So there is two sides to that argument. Some Christians, remember some, not all, some Christians think that we should act in dominion because of the source of wisdom from Psalms. And some Christians think we should act as stewards because Adam was placed in the Garden of Eden, and the Garden of Eden is a metaphor for the whole world and that we should care for it. Muslims are also quite similar. Muslims are taught in the Quran that animals are not as important as humans have a soul and animals do not. But following the teachings of Prophet Muhammad, animals must be treated with care. Okay, the planet relies on the balance of both animals and humans being treated with care and compassionately towards one another for us to survive as humankind. I have put in an extra story or a source of wisdom that you could use, which is the story of the prostitute and the dog, which supports a Muslim's view on stewardship. In this story, a prostitute, okay, and which you've learnt from the relationship unit, things such as prostitution, sex before marriage, adultery, okay, they're all considered sin in Christianity and Islam, okay, because you should only be having sex if you're married. A prostitute, okay, who would be considered as someone who would have been quite sinful in those days, okay, because she's having sex outside of marriage, helped a dog, a thirsty dog, okay, have water from the well. Okay, the dog went to a religious woman and she didn't help him, and the dog then went to the prostitute and asked for water, and she got her shoe and she placed water into it. So she put some water into her shoe from the well for the dog. After that happened, okay, all her sins were forgiven. This shows that the value that helping animals has in the Islamic world. Okay, the religious woman who appeared to be religious didn't help her, the dog, but the prostitute did. Okay, so it's a really, really good story to mention in an exam when you're talking about Muslim views on stewardship. This brings us on to our final one, humanist view on stewardship, okay? So, Peter Singer, key thinker, speciesism. Now, this is one of the questions that came up in your mock in year 9. Okay, Peter Singer believes that animals and all living things basically are sentient beings. Okay, we feel pain. Okay, animals feel pain just how humans do. Therefore, we should have responsibility to work towards a more sustainable world. okay? But humanists don't believe in God, okay? So Christians and Muslims are acting as stewards because God said to, but a humanist thinks we should act as stewards because of our own responsibility and our own humanity, not because God said so, okay? We should cause little harm to the environment. So Peter Singer is a fantastic example to bring in when you're looking at a humanist view on stewardship. Again, another topic following on from stewardship, lesson and topic number 5, the sanctity of life. Okay, again, 3 columns: Christian views on the sanctity of life, Muslim views on the sanctity of life, humanist views on the sanctity of life. The sanctity of life, okay, now you should know this and it should roll off your tongue, is the view that all life is precious and holy and belongs to God. Therefore, if it belongs to God, only He has the power to give our life to us, okay? So unit 2, life, and He has the power to take our life from us. Unit 2, death, life and death, okay? The sanctity of life is at the pinnacle of this unit, okay? So the sanctity of life, all life is precious and holy and it belongs to God. Therefore, He has the power to give life and He has the power to take life. Christian views on the sanctity of life. Again, I'm explaining this to everybody in the terms of source of wisdom, so your revision notes are detailed with lots and lots and lots of evidence from the Bible and the Quran to show that examiner an extra bit of glitter. Okay? So, you yourself are God's temple from the chapter Corinthians in the Bible. This shows us, okay, that Christians view on the sanctity of life means that, yes, you shouldn't be harming people because you are God's temple. So harming your own body, getting things like a tattoo or hurting one another is damaging God. Okay? Some people, some classes got to debate about this topic and actually spoke about this idea of tattoos, and if getting a tattoo of a cross is damaging God's temple, but if it's a cross, should it be fine because it's a Christian symbol? Okay, these are all the sort of different theological and debates you should start thinking about when you're writing your essays. From the book of Jeremiah: before I formed you in the womb, I knew you before you were born. Okay, again, God has the power to take life and God has the power to give life, and He knew when He would take and give this life before we were even in this world. Muslims view on the sanctity of life. Again, taking care of ourselves. Do not kill the soul which God has forbidden. Whoever kills a person, it shall be as if he has killed all of mankind. Okay? So if you kill one person in a war, according to the sanctity of life for Muslims, that's completely wrong because this is if you've killed all of mankind. Just how when you learn in the human rights unit, if you give charity to one person, it's as if you've helped all of mankind. The same goes for hurting another individual. Humanists also believe in a concept of the sanctity of life, this idea of life being precious and sacred, okay? But not because this value comes from God. We only have one life which will end forever when we die, and the central purpose of life is to make everyone around us happy. Okay, this idea of a happy human for the humanists. Moving on swiftly to the quality of life. Okay, this is opposite to the sanctity of life. Okay, so the sanctity of life says life is precious and holy, it belongs to God. The quality of life is how fulfilled do we feel in our life. You can see in this diagram there's a range of factors that would affect our quality of life. Okay, health, work, social relationships, emotional well-being, quality of environment, personal safety, belonging, and financial and material well-being. Okay, it's about what is our ability to live without excessive suffering, to experience life, and to communicate and interact with others. Both the quality and the sanctity of life will be very, very helpful when we now look at abortion and euthanasia. Right, so we are back to this 3-way table of Christian views on abortion, Muslim views on abortion, and humanist views on abortion. For this part of the revision video for lessons topic 7 on abortion and topic 8 on euthanasia, it's really important to remember that Christians and Muslims should not be viewed as a homogenous group, in the sense that they do not share one view, and just how they had different views on the origin of the world, they will have contrasting views within themselves on topics like abortion and euthanasia. Okay, so again, it should roll off your tongue. The definition of abortion is the legal termination of a pregnancy. Okay, now in this country it's legal. Remember, in your lessons you would have discussed some countries where abortion is illegal and the protests that people have done to make it legal. So a Catholic, a conservative Christian, would say that life begins at conception, therefore abortion is forbidden, and the Catholic Church has said that you should not kill the embryo by abortion. A Protestant, on the other hand, okay, would say that abortion may be morally preferable in some situations, since God is omnibenevolent, all-loving. So this situation might be in the situation of when the mother's health is at risk, the woman has been raped, the woman is young, okay, or perhaps the baby might be born with a birth defect, okay. You would have looked at all these case studies as well. Muslims, okay, again, two very similar views. The Quran does not actually discuss abortion, okay? Because you've got to bear in mind, the days of the Quran and the Bible being written, abortion wasn't really the medical idea of it that we know now, and this idea of there being abortion clinics, okay? Most of the time during these days, women probably weren't getting abortions, or naturally their babies were just dying anyway through miscarriages, okay? So a Muslim would say you should not kill your children for economic reasons, okay? So from that, they can interpret that if you are having an abortion because of financial difficulties, you should not be going through with that, because Allah will provide for you. However, just like Protestant, a liberal Muslim would say Allah is all-loving, so some situations will require an abortion. The mother's rights are greater in the first 120 days of pregnancy, because this is when, surprise, surprise, the woman, after the 100 days, the baby actually gets a soul. Okay, and this idea of a soul is one of the other topics in the Unit 2 of Life and Death. Okay, and humanists will always prioritize happiness, okay, the quality of life, not the sanctity. Therefore, abortion is allowed if you have considered the long and short-term effects. Okay, so a humanist isn't for abortion or against abortion. A humanist is very much pro-choice. Okay, what does the mother want? If the mother wants an abortion, that's good for her. If the mother doesn't want one, then that's also good for her. Okay, this idea of being pro-choice, as you have discussed in class, okay, pro-choice does not always mean for abortion. Okay, as some mothers are perfectly happy to keep their baby and not go through the abortion. So we've looked at the start of life with abortion, okay, this idea of who has the right to be born. Now we're going to look at this concept of who has the right to die. Okay, euthanasia. Okay, euthanasia, okay, EU, Greek for good, thanatos, Greek for death. Okay, euthanasia is a mercy killing, a good death. There's different types of euthanasia that you would have discussed in class, such as passive, active, voluntary, involuntary. Again, we will look at this through Christian views, Muslim views, and humanist views. Some conservative Christians say that euthanasia is wrong because it is murder, and that goes against the 10 Commandments. Suffering is a test from God, as we have learned in the story of Job. A liberal Christian would say that Jesus taught us to be loving, and in fact, if a person is brain dead, we should turn off life support. A Muslim view on euthanasia: we should show compassion to patients in pain regardless, and the soul is perfect. So for a conservative Muslim, okay, the soul is perfect at that point, even if they are going through pain, so we should not euthanize them. But some Muslim liberal lawyers have agreed that a patient, such as liberal Christians, that has no hope of recovery, can have their machines turned off. Okay, the machine isn't working anymore for them, therefore euthanasia would be okay. This whole idea of conservative Christian, liberal Christian, conservative Muslim, and liberal Muslim, this feeds into a very, very good and effective high-level 15-mark question. Okay? So for humanist view, to sort of round it all up, a non-religious viewpoint, again, back to Peter Singer, this concept of euthanasia, the quality of life will override the sanctity of life. The patient should always have a choice. Okay? This is a human right. Okay, just how you've looked at in Unit 4 Human Rights, this is a human right. So, just how humanists have said for abortion, the mother should have a choice, okay, if she wants to keep the baby or not. Humanists for euthanasia, the patient should have a choice if they want to die, okay. We should not go and decide if people are in pain and that we should euthanize them. According to humanists, it is up to the patient. Okay, if the patient has not told you that they want to die, you should not assume that just because you're seeing them in pain that they want to die. You have to make sure that you understand these different viewpoints when answering a longer exam question. So we've looked at abortion, we've looked at the start of abortion, we've looked at the start of life, and we've looked at the terminating of life through euthanasia. Okay. But so then now we're going to look at this idea of the soul, the afterlife, funerals. Okay, what happens after we die? So when you learnt this in class, you would have learnt about 3 different aspects of the soul, okay? Dualism, non-dualism, materialism. Dualism is when the body and the soul are 2 separate parts, and it's the soul that will live on after we die. Non-dualism, the physical body and the soul are not separate but one. And materialism, there is no such thing as a soul, all we have is a body. Okay, so in the Harry Potter show of Nearly Headless Nick, okay, non-dualism, Nearly Headless Nick would be a non-dualist idea of a soul, okay, that his physical body and his soul were together, okay, they were not separate but one entity. So, Christian views on the soul. Christians believe that we do have a soul because in Genesis chapter 2 verse 1, God did breathe a soul into Adam and Eve and into us, okay. Aquinas, again, you've come across him before in Unit 1 of Relationships, a Catholic thinker, taught that ensoulment happens straight after conception. Okay, so as soon as you've been conceived, okay, you now have a soul, which actually makes things a little bit more difficult for things like abortion, okay, if you are speaking from a Catholic viewpoint. A dualist Christian, okay, says that the soul is separate from the body and will go to everlasting life in heaven. And a non-dualist Christian will say the body and soul cannot be separated. Now, you'll look at this idea in much more detail when you do Christian beliefs and practices, okay? But Jesus, okay, the body and soul will be united on Judgment Day, as this is what happened for Jesus. Muslim view on the soul. According to the Quran, God made Adam from earth, so we have a physical body, okay? This idea of being made from mud, we have a physical body. However, we are also blessed with a ruh, okay, a soul. This is the non-physical part of our being which makes us a real person, okay? The ability to think, feel, have heartful conversation, okay? Every newborn child is born in a state of fitra, purity, okay? It is the purpose for the soul for us to submit to Allah, okay? So when Muslims are praying, it is not actually their physical body that is sitting there doing the hand gestures of the prayer. It is actually the soul, okay? This innate feeling inside of us. Humanist view on the soul. Humanists are materialists, okay? So there's no such thing as a soul. All we have is a body. So when we die, we become a skeleton and dirt. No soul, no physical soul, such as Nearly Headless Nick in Harry Potter, will live on, okay? So Gilbert Rye used the phrase the ghost in the machine. This refers to the idea that humans may think that they have a soul, but in reality there is nothing there. So now that we've looked at this idea of the soul, it's really important to understand what a Christian, a Muslim, and a humanist using this and applying it to what they think about the afterlife. So, the afterlife. Christians' view on the afterlife. So, there's a lot of information for this, and there was a lot of source of wisdom that would have been discussed in class, okay? But you are very lucky because you get to revisit this when you do Christian beliefs and practices. For both Muslims and Christian views on the afterlife, this is discussed again in beliefs and practices. So, Christian views of the afterlife. The good evidence for this is from the Matthew parable of the sheep and the goats. Okay? So, Jesus explains the story in this parable that people were separated into two groups. Okay? It is helping his followers understand what judgment will be like. Okay? So, those that have believed in God, okay, and done good deeds and lived good lives will be placed in heaven. And those who have believed in God but sinned will be placed on the other side and will go to hell. Similarly, a Muslim view on the afterlife, okay, which is called the Akhirah, it is Allah who decides when a person dies, and most Muslims believe that when they die, they will stay in their graves until the Day of Judgment. Again, these sort of complex terminology will be discussed again in Muslim beliefs and practices. On that day, they will be raised from the graves and brought before Allah and then judged again. Okay, this idea of the resurrection of the body, the coming of the Mahdi. Now, for the humanist part, I didn't actually put in any information for you guys, and I've put a link symbol because I want you guys to think about, if a humanist says there's no soul, what would a humanist say about what happens to us after we die? Well, if there's no soul, nothing happens to us after we die. We literally, as a humanist has already said, okay, we become just bites of information, dirt. Okay, skeletons. That's it. There is no afterlife. Okay, it doesn't exist. We literally we die, we're dug up, and that's it. Okay, so going on to our final unit now. Okay, leading on from the soul and the afterlife is, of course, what happens once we die is the majority of people will have a funeral ceremony. Okay, now we have looked at how Christians, Muslims, and humanists maybe get married. Okay, we've looked at different milestones that they might celebrate. But for this unit 2 on life and death, you look at how funeral ceremonies are carried out in each faith. Okay, so Christian funeral ceremonies, of course, take place in a church. Okay, and I've put 2 sources of wisdom down, okay, from Psalm and John. The Lord is my shepherd is often read in funerals, and I am the resurrection and the life is also something that might be carved onto gravestones to remind this idea of the end of life, okay, and celebrating what's happened. In a Muslim funeral, the Shahada is recited again, okay, which is usually recited when a Muslim becomes a Muslim, so at birth or if they're reverted, okay. And from the earth we created you, and to him we shall return. Okay, inna lillahi wa inna lillahi raji'un. Okay, which is what the Muslims would say at a funeral, and again that takes place in a mosque. It's usually segregated, and in the revision notes that will go up from your class teachers, there will be 2 links for you guys to watch on how a Christian funeral happens and how a Muslim funeral happens. Humanists, okay, don't follow any sort of religious funeral, okay? This service is led by a humanist celebrant, and the service will try to show respect for the dead person without suggesting that they are going to a better place, okay? So coffin designs might be quite unique as well, and I've put an example of a fish coffin and a Twix coffin, okay? These are coffins that you will find in sort of humanist celebrations, okay? No sort of religious significance, but for Christians and Muslims, they'll be a bit more religious or plain for their coffins, okay? So that brings us on to the final part of this revision loom. Well done for getting to the end of it, and I hope you have made loads of notes that will help you not just with your revision and your fun facts, but also how to answer 2 markers, 5 markers, 8 markers, and 15 markers. Okay, so we've covered in this loom the origin of the world according to religion, the origin of the world according to science, the design argument, stewardship, sanctity of life, quality of life, abortion, euthanasia, the soul, the afterlife, and funerals. So you've done really well because you've covered this whole unit in under 40 minutes, okay? So you have covered a whole half term's worth of units, okay, in under 40 minutes. You have covered 11 lessons in under that time, okay? That is less than 1 lesson is. So when you make your notes, okay, remember that you should only be focusing on Christians, Muslims, and humanists, and you should also be getting your terminology correct and your spelling for your spag marks. But in general, okay, everything that you do in Unit 2 Life and Death links up not only to this unit, but other units, so relationships, human rights, and good and evil, okay? I think this is probably one of my favourite units, and I'm really glad I got to do the revision loom on this as well. So you know where to find me or any of your class teachers if you need help on anything that I've said on this revision video, and I wish you the best of luck with the rest of your revision. Thanks guys!